It's now time for Energy Insights, where you get an inside view and local perspective of all the oil and gas progress going on in the Mid-Ohio Valley. This program is brought to you by the Southeastern Ohio Oil and Gas Association and can be heard every Saturday at 9 a.m. on WMOA AM 1490, FM 101.3, JAWS Country FM 100.9, and ESPN Radio AM 630 and FM 92.9. Here's Johnny Wharf, your local host.
Energy Insights on a Saturday morning. Greg Kimble is our guest, and Kimble Companies out of Dover, Ohio. We're on location as we broadcast here in the conference room, if you will, of Kimble Companies. Talk a little bit about the early days for Greg Kimble in this business, what it was like, and where it's come to today. I imagine when you sit back and take a look, it probably takes you a little while, right?
It's changed a little bit since the very early days, just after high school, working in coal production, where coal was run through a coal prep plant, picking table where you actually manually separated rock from coal and did some things like that, and fed coal to places like Cleveland Electric Illuminating and Kent State University to keep them in the warm, and the medical center in Cleveland that kept Case Western University and university hospitals all warm. Today, virtually all of those are gas-fired. And, fast forward to, as a young engineer, worked for a few years at Square D Company as a power distribution field engineer. In the 70s, we had an energy shortage. And the price of fuel quadrupled in a matter of weeks. When you went to buy gasoline for your car and you could only fuel on even days or odd days and things like that, and the price went from 35 cents a gallon to $1.35 a gallon. And we became involved in the drilling and production of gas and oil, and sometimes actually traded crude oil for fuel to run our mining equipment because it was on allocation. And we needed that fuel to be able to produce the coal to keep Kent State warm.
Yeah, it's fascinating to me. And again, Greg Kimble is our guest, Kimble Companies out of Dover, to think about. I mean, there's got to be a vision and then a process and then the hope of where you're headed. But there's so many unknowns. You talk about tripping or leaping over some of those unknowns along the way when you developed this?
Well, it's primarily making advantage of each opportunity. It's kind of like the butcher that wants to get every part of the pig except the squeal into some package. Yeah. And so we start mining, looking for coal, but we take clay out of the ground that's right under the coal. We send it to the brickyards to make ceramics and bricks from. We take the shale out to make clay pipe, and we take the limestone out and crush it for road aggregate. Well, a little deeper in the earth is natural gas and oil, and so we'll produce that also and use it to help with our production of other materials. And leaping forward, that natural gas production today is now fueling our refuse collection fleet running here in Ohio. So we're using Ohio-produced fuel to provide benefit for Ohio people.
Talk a little bit about the Kimble Companies as it relates to the employment, obviously in a community. And it's, number one, so tough to get people, or you hear about, tough to keep people, get the right people in the right places. Talk about your company from that standpoint.
Well, we have almost any kind of job you can imagine available today.
It sounds like it. You got so many things going on, right?
Yeah. From guys running heavy equipment in the mining operation to guys running heavy equipment in the landfill operation. But behind each one of those guys, there's an engineer that did the design, and there's surveyors and so on laying out and tracking what's going on and planning for what's going in the future. And there's guys driving the trucks, and there's guys doing maintenance on all those vehicles. We've got truck mechanics, and we've got heavy equipment mechanics. We've got welders. We've got shop people. We've got supply people. providing all the parts and making sure the mechanics have what they need, down to manual labor positions. Somebody's got to shovel the dirt and move the snow and all those things that just at every level. And then when you go to the office, somebody's got to keep track of that stuff.
Yeah, that's right.
So there's a huge amount of HR development. There's to keep the people. There's 60-some people in the phone bank answering the phones, communicating with the public.
Sure.
There are lots and lots of accounting positions and tax reporting positions and just a wide variety of folks. And then the facilities maintenance people it takes to provide housing for those people. And
sure.
Every time you provide a desk, you need a phone and an air conditioner and electric and lighting, and just kind of snowballs.
Yeah. In a good way, too. It sounds like Greg Kimble is our guest. Kimble Companies is the place, Southeastern Ohio Oil and Gas Association, making it possible for us to learn a little bit more and get some insights into the energy industry. And we'll speak more with Kimble Companies Associates on Energy Insights each Saturday right here on the radio. Energy Insights on a Saturday morning, and pleased to be joined by Greg Kimble again, Kimble Companies, Dover, Ohio, on location. And I want to jump back from where we were last week a little bit. You had me at Kent State and the engineering of what you do, and I think about all the different types of engineers there are. Maybe you can dig a little deeper into the beginnings of you coming maybe out of school and into Kent State. Take us back to there and talk a little bit about keeping the lights on, so to speak.
Well, I actually was a rebel. I went a little further than that. We were supplying coal initially that was keeping the heat on at Kent State University, but I went as far as I could go without going out of state. So I'm a graduate of the University of Cincinnati Electrical Engineering Program.
All right, go Bearcats, good year, right? So. All right, so so take us back to the process of moving into the business. As a young man, trying to figure things out, and again, as you mentioned last week, just kind of grabbing those opportunities.
Well, I was fortunate enough to have worked in the business with the family in the mining operation before I went off to school in the co-op program at the University of Cincinnati, which then took 5 years because it was alternating quarters and working in between, which gave you a lot of valuable field experience. And I came from there and went to the University of Cincinnati, or went to Squared E Company as a field engineer, and worked with them in some very challenging times in 1975, 1976, working in eastern West Virginia and eastern part of Kentucky. But an opportunity came back here in Tuscarawas County. The family had started to drill gas and oil wells. And so I had an opportunity to understudy a gentleman by the name of Jack Seymour, who was 60 years old at the time, had worked and drilled around every kind of rig I'd ever read about. And so I, for 3 years, lived in a pickup truck next to his and learned the ins and outs of drilling gas wells.
And probably at the time, those were not particularly special memories, but I bet now looking back, they are, aren't they?
Well, very much so. You learned to be very independent. You had to make the decisions that made things work, and you had to make the calculations for everything from drill strength to hydraulic pressures to tubular construction in wells to cementing, properly constructing the wells and keep them under control and get all the product out of the ground and separated and into the gathering line to be shipped off to market.
Can you break out Kimble Companies in terms of how much of this company is the business, or are we going out and picking up individuals' trash? Are we so much oil and gas? Are we so much people calling up and saying, "Come pick this up"? Or how? Can you break out the company for me?
I would say that we're probably 75% of our manpower today, maybe a little more, is in the residential and commercial refuse collection. But then we operate a landfill that takes best available technologies landfill that takes a number of people to run that as well. And when you start with engineering, about $1 million an acre in engineering to create the space for the landfill, and then have all the liners and permitting and everything in place, and the continual inspection at every level. Everybody from the local health department to the EPA checking on you regularly. So quite a number of people there. But we have about 50 people working in oil and gas production and gathering systems. And those guys also provide some specialty services to the other companies. We've got the crane guys and the, roustabouts and those folks that aren't normally in other businesses.
I want to grab you, and again, I'm out of time this week, but maybe I want to talk about that when the recycling came into it all. It just doesn't seem like that long ago in my mind, but we'll break out on that maybe next week here on Energy Insights. But fabulous stuff. Just to sit here and I become a listener. Here I am the interviewer and I get lost in the story, which I guess is the good part of this job. But Greg Kimble, our guest, Kimble Companies out of Dover, Ohio, and that'll do it for today. Thanks to the Southeastern Ohio Oil and Gas Association. Energy Insights on a Saturday morning, and as promised last week, I am going to hold Greg down for a little bit more information about Kimble Companies. We're on location in Dover, Ohio, and I wanted to jump into the world of recycling. And I think about, certainly when I graduated from college in the 80s, it wasn't around. Maybe even when I got married in the early 90s, it wasn't. I don't know when it all happened. You probably can demarcate at least close as to when recycling became such the big part of refuge collection.
Well, in the 90s, it was becoming in vogue, and it started out very simple. If you had a product that had a lot of cardboard, we'd take it back to a paper or a manufacturer and so on. But in about 1994, we actually put in a dedicated commingled recycling facility in Canton, Ohio. And it would take about 5 tons an hour. Now, 5 tons of commingled recyclables is a large pile. If you can think about plastic bottles and those kinds of things stacked together, it takes a lot of them. And so those bottles represent natural gas and oil that have been produced somewhere else, converted to plastics, utilized somewhere. It might be your 2-liter pop jug or your milk jug that then winds up at our facility, and they get separated according to the little symbol on the bottom, whether it's a number 1 plastic or a number 2 plastic. There's 7 numbers of plastics, and then differentiating between the clear and the coloreds as different products, and separating as it went through the line, they pulled off the cardboard, and this was a manual process at that time.
Sure.
So we had 19 to 24 typically handicapped individuals that ran the plant, and we're very, very proud of what they did and did a fantastic job at that. But the first 2 guys would pull off the cardboard. The next 2 guys would pull off the paper, and then it would go through a magnet that separated out the metal, the ferrous metals, the iron, and then went through a screen that separated it into various sizes and went down a couple conveyor lines where people manually picked off. And the first person would pick off 2-liter jugs, and the next person would pick off milk jugs, and the next person would pick off the soap jugs and toss them into a bunker below where they would get baled up and shipped back to the consumers of the recycled plastics.
This becomes the cycle of products, right? Because then we come right back around to the beginning.
Actually, yeah, like the aluminum beverage containers, the pop cans, are actually some of the best quality aluminum that exists in the industry.
Yeah.
And they can be remelted and go back into the industry again, or next week it may be the stop sign at the end of your road is the aluminum pop can you drank last week.
All right. Kimble Companies is our guest, specifically Greg Kimble with Kimble Companies here in Dover, Ohio, and move into the oil and gas industry as it relates to recycling? Are we recycling what comes out of the oil and gas? I should know the answer before I ask the question, but tell me about recycling as it relates to oil and gas.
Well, there are two different, distinctly, time periods in my mind, or different answers to your question.
All right.
One of them relates to we're taking very old organic material that's buried in the earth and is decomposing and producing natural gas, and we're bringing that out and running it through our vehicles to go to collect these recyclables and to collect the refuse. But
what is that? What is it? It's
methane?
Yeah.
And methane, which is the primary constituent of natural gas.
Sure. Okay.
The other answer to your question is, as these materials that are buried in the landfill decompose, they liberate methane, and currently the gas coming off the landfill is about 55% methane, and the bulk of the remainder of it's carbon dioxide, CO2. And so we're gathering that and using that as a fuel source as well.
In your own operation?
Yes.
Okay.
And in fact, we're flaring some at the moment, but whether it's going to go to generation or whether it's going to go to fueling our refuse vehicles very shortly. But the 150 rough acres of landfill that's 30 and 40 years old is producing about as much natural gas as our 600 conventional Clinton wells are at this moment.
Oh, that's fantastic. I tiptoed into the question because I wasn't sure what I was asking. I'm fascinated with the answer, and I appreciate you breaking it out for me. Greg Kimble, our guest, Kimble Companies, Dover, Ohio, another energy insights in the hopper and a chance to get a little bit smarter about the oil and gas industry, and we thank the company and Greg specifically today. Until next week, have a great day. Energy Insights on a Saturday, and Greg Kimble is our guest from Kimble Companies in Dover, Ohio. And I kind of want to circle back with you. I had a chance to meet you and discuss several items, and I kind of want to jump back on that. There is a perception, I think, that some people say, well, there's recycling guys come along and they get the stuff and they throw it in there and then they just end up throwing it away anyway. Maybe you could, for our listeners, kind of go through a process of how intricate this business of recycling is.
Well, there is some reject in any recyclable, what can be sold or saved. And when we talk about the paradox of commingled recyclables, because most people aren't able to understand that there's at least seven different numbers or types of plastics, times two for the coloreds versus the clears, and so on. And most people don't know, looking at a can, if it's really an aluminum can or a steel can, and getting it properly separated. So trying to separate those from the source is very expensive and complex. So we do commingled recycling, where they all go back to a system where it's separated.
All right. Greg Kimble is our guest. Kimble Companies out of Dover, Ohio, trash hauling, oil and gas recycling, and various companies here. But you had mentioned in a previous show about the outset of recycling, if it was mid-'90s, whatever, for the sake, let's just say it was mid-'90s. But now we think about how intricate technology, if there's infrared cameras to focus on what kind of plastic, or if there's robotics, I assume now all of a sudden, does that mean that we've displaced those people that were so fortunate? You talked about how happy a lot of the folks that you employed back in the day were to have a job that may not otherwise, but what has happened there, from the employment standpoint?
Well, we've still got lots of room for lots of employees, more than we can find almost every day. And there is an opportunity, in the manual sorting process, those folks became specialists. If a guy did 2-liter jugs, you didn't move him over to do milk jugs because he was proud that he was a specialist in 2-liter jugs. That's what he did. Yeah. Today, we've got more automated equipment, and so those people become, instead of manually sorting at the source level, they become the inspectors and rejectors, if you will, when the product's coming out of the machine. and there's a line of 2-liter jugs coming down. If there's a milk jug in there, the machine made a mistake, or it fell through the cracks somehow, then that guy's job is to make sure that doesn't go past him on the line. And so we still got, now we're producing 4 or 5 times as much product per hour with a similar number of people on the line. But it takes a lot of people also to maintain the equipment and to run that equipment. And then the development of specialized equipment, like one of the machines is called a Spider. It's a spectrographic ultraviolet infrared analyzer that looks at the plastics going by, and if it can identify the plastics, it separates them into 2 or 3 streams by looking at them. But the complexities of, if you got a 2-liter jug that's PET material and it's wrapped with a PVC label, the machine may not understand that, and it kicks it in the wrong place. Well, the person standing on the line obviously knows the difference between the two and make sure it goes the right place.
Right. So the end, they're managing the process, and again, probably that same pride maybe that they would have had, it falls into that line as well, right?
Absolutely, and pride for all of our people in getting the job done well, producing clean product that's demanded in the market is the better job our people do, the more their job is demanded or rewarded.
Greg, give me not an analogy, maybe a better number on if you deal in tons, where you were maybe back in the day compared to where you are now in terms of recycling materials.
Well, our original plant had a capacity of about 5 tons per hour, fully staffed and running. And today, we're running 20 to 27 tons an hour. So 5 times as much product going through the line. So we have to do some things. There aren't spaces to put that many people. So we have to do something with automation to make it work. But at the same time, if you're using an air jet, say, to pop off the aluminum cans, you got to be careful not to use a penny's worth of compressed air to pop off a 1-penny can, or you're never going to see a profit.
All right. Well, hey, listen, I appreciate what you do. I appreciate you sharing it with us here on the program, and we'll try to get it out to as many people as possible, and I appreciate you inviting us to your place as well.
Thank you.
All right, Greg Kimble is our guest here, Energy Insights, Kimble Companies out of Dover, Ohio. Until next week, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Energy Insights, brought to you by the Southeastern Ohio Oil and Gas Association. Tune in every Saturday morning at 9 a.m. on WMOA Local Radio, JAWS Country, and ESPN Radio, as Johnny Wharf brings you your local and inside perspectives going on in the oil and gas industry right here in the Mid-Ohio Valley.